Hi everyone. Welcome to Clone Compounding, where our mission is to learn from others in order to achieve financial independence.
Today, let's take a look at the summary of a recent article by legendary investor Ray Dalio published in Time magazine titled, "Why the World is on the Brink of Great Disorder." In this article, he shares his research and conclusions on what is happening to the world order. For this, he studied the rises and declines of markets, economies, and countries over the last 500 years. Stay tuned as we summarize and analyze the key insights from this article. Mr. Dalio says that he is a global macro investor who has been betting on what's going to happen for over 50 years. He has been through all sorts of events and cycles in all sorts of places over a long time, which led him to study how these events and cycles work. Mr. Dalio summarizes the key factors behind major changes as the 5 big forces. He came to realize that if one understands and follows each of these forces and how they interact, one can understand most everything that's changing the world order. Let's take a look at these forces. 1. The financial or economic force. In the US, we are now in the middle part of what he calls the short-term debt cycle. These short-term debt cycles have lasted 7 years on average, give or take about 3 years. There have been around 12 of them since the new monetary world order started in 1945. So, we are now about halfway through the 13th of the cycle, at the point of the cycle when the central bank has tightened money to fight inflation that is just before the debt and economic contractions which will likely come over next 18 months. We are also in a late and dangerous part of the long-term debt cycle. The levels of debt assets and debt liabilities have become so high that it is difficult to give lender creditors a high enough interest rate relative to inflation that is adequate to make them want to hold this debt as an asset. Because of unsustainable debt growth, we are likely approaching a major inflection point that will change the financial order. More specifically, it appears likely that because of large deficits, U.S. Treasury will have to sell a lot of debt, and it appears there will not be adequate demand for it. If that happens, it will lead to either much higher interest rates or the Fed printing a lot of money and buying bonds, which will devalue money. For these reasons, the debt financial conditions could worsen, perhaps very significantly, over the next 18 months. 2. The domestic order force. In several countries, most importantly the US, we have seen a growing percentage of the population that are populist extremists. About 20-25% of the right are extreme and about 10-15% of the left are, and a shrinking of the percentage of the population that are bipartisan moderates. Though the bipartisan moderates still remain in the majority, they constitute a declining percentage of the population, and they are far less willing to fight and win at all costs. In studying history, he saw this growing populism of both sides, and increased conflict has repeatedly occurred when large gaps in wealth and values existed at the same time as bad economic conditions. At such times, significant percentages of the population chose populist political leaders who vowed to fight and win for them rather than compromise. That is what is now happening. Looking ahead, the next 18 months will be an increasingly intense big election period which will lead to much greater political conflict, which is likely to sharpen the divide between the left and the right. The presidency and control of the House will be fought over by a number of populist candidates, and there will likely be poor economic conditions, so the fights will be vicious and there will be a real test of rule following. You can see the movement toward a win-at-all-cost fight while the respect for the legal and political systems declines. To him, the most important conflict is between the bipartisan moderates and the populist extremes, yet the bipartisan moderates are for the most part quietly staying out of this fight. 3. The international world order force. The conflicts between the US and China are likely to intensify as domestic political tensions will likely lead to increased aggressiveness toward China. That is because in the US most everyone is anti-China, and those running for office will want to out-China bash each other in an election year. China and the US are already dangerously close to some form of war, whether an all-out economic one or, worse, a military one. There are also important elections in Taiwan next year, which is already a flashpoint in US-China elections, and a US-backed push for Taiwanese independence is something to keep a close eye on when weighing the potential for even more overt US-China conflict. There are several issues: Taiwan, chips, dealing with Russia, sanctioning investments, that are being fought over, and both sides are preparing for war. 4. Acts of nature. Acts of nature are of course harder to predict accurately, but they appear to be getting worse and are likely to be more costly and damaging over the next 5 to 10 years due to climate change. 5. Technology. What can we expect from technology, human inventiveness? Like acts of nature, it is hard to know exactly, though there should be no doubt that generative AI and other technological advances have the potential to cause both massive productivity gains and massive destructions, depending on how they are used. The one thing that we can be sure of is that these changes will be greatly disruptive. How well these changes are managed will make all the difference. If our leaders can rise above their tendencies to fight and instead focus on cooperating, we can certainly navigate these tricky times to create a better world for most people.
For now, that's it from us. Hope you enjoyed and learned from this video. Smash that like button and subscribe to receive more videos on memos and write-ups from top investors. Thanks for watching.